I know that many of you are looking forward to Thursday, Thanksgiving. So I hope that you will give thanks to the many blessings that we all enjoy. And many of you looking forward to Friday when you've got a regular work week and you get Friday off, Black Friday, and time to spend time with family and friends and enjoy the holidays. I'm looking forward to those things as well. I'm looking forward to Tuesday night. Tuesday night is going to be fascinating. Not because I live such a fascinating life. It's because we are going to gather together to watch the unveiling of the college football playoff rankings. That will be fascinating. Welcome into the Voice of College Football. Appreciate you being here. Best discussion, debate, and analysis. Let's clear up a few things off the top. Of course, we had a fun show last night. Thanks to all of you who showed up and who participated both in the chat and for those callers that called. I know that by the time a number of you got off the line with me, you were making comments like, you changed my mind. I'm looking at this differently. Well, I appreciate that, but all the calls that we got last night were first rate. So you guys definitely brought some valid points to the table across the board. And I simply, hey, provide my feedback. You can learn from me. I can learn from you. We can see it from a different perspective because this is a somewhat complicated process when you try to evaluate football teams that don't play each other. So it's going to, once again, be fascinating. I don't use that word very often. I've been watching college football for 45 plus years and love the sport. Always have. I suspect I always will. Although there are aspects of the sport that turn me off more and more and more and more. But once they get on the field and start playing, like we saw against at Auburn last night with Texas A&M and Auburn, those kind of games certainly draw us in. So the competition on the field is pretty remarkable every weekend. So this ranking system, boy, it's going to be fascinating because, again, I think a lot of us have standards as to which teams should be in or why they should be in or what the criteria should be. But let's remember that we are not judging a 4-team field. We're judging a 12-team field. So keep in mind that 2 losses did not cut it in a 4-team field, of course. There were a couple instances in which a 2-loss team did have an argument, and there was a situation in 2017 where a 2-loss team under the old format would have gone to the playoff. It's not disputable. They were inside the top 4 with 2 losses, but Auburn lost the SEC championship game that year and got knocked out. So extrapolate that forward to a 12-team playoff, 3 times as many teams. Therefore, when you look at the past records of these teams that would have made the playoffs and would have been in more so just in competition for a playoff berth going into the final weekend of the season, we wouldn't necessarily be impressed with those teams either. We have a number of teams that lost on Saturday, and they're not going to fall far because they've got nowhere to fall because everybody lost behind them, or a number of key teams lost behind them. We saw about half of the top 15 lose. So those teams aren't going to fall much, if at all. Indiana lost as the number 5 team in the country. You could make an argument that they shouldn't fall at all. I'm not saying that they shouldn't. I just said that you could make an argument. I could make an argument, believe me, that they shouldn't fall. All right, so we appreciate you being here. We'll take your calls and your comments and questions there. Venmo, PayPal, and Cash App. That's actually, we'll explain this a little bit at some point, maybe in the next couple of weeks. Venmo, PayPal, and Cash App. That's actually a much more effective way. And if you want to ask a question and contribute on Venmo, PayPal, and Cash App, we'll work something out where you post something maybe in caps, all caps, and then I'll check my Venmo, PayPal, and Cash App. And it's much better for you. It's better for the Voice of College Football. And by extension, it's better for me because you are giving to the Voice of College Football. So we appreciate that. I get a large portion of that. Well, it used to be a large portion. Got too many people working at this place now. It's a portion of it. So do appreciate you being here at the Voice of Cali Football. All right. And you can keep me around as long as you would like today. So we'll be here for roughly an hour or maybe more, depending on if you would like to be on for longer than that. We've got a call coming in from Michael. He was first in line. So, Michael, what's going on?
Hey, Mark. Good morning, sir. How you doing?
Good morning. I'm doing just fine. How are you?
Good. I hope you and your family have a great Thanksgiving on Thursday and eat a lot of turkey and watch some good football.
I hope so, too.
All right, I got to ask you this. I didn't get to, and I thought about it last night. If you was to rank 5 games yesterday, 1 to 5 of the best games of the day, what would they be? And yes, you can include the Ohio State IU game too if you wanted to.
Well, I understand first and foremost, as is the problem with college football every week, is that I don't get to see a lot of games that I would like to see that I think looked like really good games. I wanted to see USC and UCLA, for example, last night. I always like watching that game. I like watching rivalry games. I did not see one play of it, and I have little motivation at this point to go back and watch two.
I actually fell asleep, so I don't even know who won the game.
USC won 19-13.
Okay.
So I read the recap, looked at the box score, that sort of thing. But I'm not going to sit down here.
Okay, fair enough.
A day or 2 days later. So Illinois and Rutgers come to mind. So I saw the final play in which Pat Bryant scored a touchdown to win the game for Illinois in the final play of the game. So that looked like a heck of a ball game, but I didn't see the game, so I can't tell you. But it seemed pretty obvious. So I may include some of those games that I didn't see. I would say number 1, Auburn and Texas A&M. Best game that I saw all day.
Yeah.
Number 2, I would go with Penn State and Minnesota. Excellent game. A lot of special teams plays, a lot of intrigue, a lot of decision making. I just thought that was an excellent game. Maybe I was a little bit satisfied by Minnesota actually playing the type of game that I expected them to, and I actually thought they outplayed Penn State most of the game. Number 3, again, I did not see the game, but Illinois and Rutgers, I wish I would have watched that game. I wish I would have had time to see it, but I got to watch the more important games, and obviously that's not a real important game, but it looked like a heck of a game. So I'll put Illinois Rutgers at number 3. The last 2 games of the day, the best games of the day, this Arizona State BYU game, it looked like a decent game just because it got close at the end, but didn't seem to be too competitive. I can't think of 2 other games that were really that good. I guess Kansas and Colorado was a decent game. Again, I did not see one play of that game. The Alabama-Oklahoma game was a yawner. It was just interesting because Oklahoma obviously smacked them around. Yeah. So that made it interesting. I don't know. LSU and Vandy played a close game.
Where did you put Florida and Ole Miss?
Watch the game. What?
Florida and Ole Miss.
Oh, Florida Ole Miss. I forgot about that one. We'll put that one at number 4. And again, number 5. I can't even fill out 5 good games from yesterday. There's 4. Yeah. Ohio State and Indiana, if I didn't have a vested interest in the game and it was not a top 5 matchup, was it a good game? It was okay.
Yeah. I would agree for most. You're pretty much spot on with mine and stuff. I was just wondering and stuff like that. I just wanted to get you taking stuff like that about how yours is going to go and stuff like that. So, what games are you looking forward to on rivalry weekend, even though we're on a Sunday?
Well, again, I look forward to all the rivalry games. So if I had my druthers, I would watch all the rivalry games. I don't care if a team's 3-9 and the other team's 3-9. Well, of course, they would be 11-game seasons at that point. But like Cal and Stanford played on Saturday, I would watch Cal and Stanford play. But again, I just have different priorities, so I can't watch every game. So I love all the rivalry games, even if they don't mean much from a national standpoint. In terms of the games that well, let's take out the obvious. The most important game, well, it's not the most important game this year, but let's take out the obvious, Ohio State and Michigan. That's just on a different plane. Games that I want to see this weekend. Alabama, Auburn.
That'd be one.
I'm thinking of what are typically really good games, but like Florida State. Let's move that way down the list. I Alabama, Auburn. Again, I'll watch any of these games because they're rivalry games. North Carolina State. I'll watch that game, but it's these teams are no good. Minnesota, Wisconsin.
Okay.
Again, they're neither one of them, especially Wisconsin.
I'll give you three games and see what you think. Auburn, Alabama, Georgia Tech, Vanderbilt, Tennessee.
I'm trying to think of games that actually matter on the national landscape. Of course, any game can matter that's involving a top-ranked team because they could possibly lose. Like, nobody expected Alabama, Oklahoma to be much of a game, but it turned out to be an extremely important game.
Mm-hmm.
So Indiana and Purdue, that game means little because everybody expects Indiana to win, which they should. But if suddenly Purdue won the game, then it'd become an important game nationally because it would knock Indiana out of the playoffs.
Yeah.
But,
do you think the three games I list gave you are important games themselves?
What did you give me?
Alabama, Auburn, Vanderbilt, Tennessee, Georgia Tech.
Georgia Tech. Again, yes, it's important. If chalk prevails, they're not important because we expect Georgia to win and go to the playoff. But if Georgia Tech would upset Georgia, then it becomes an extremely important game. Alabama, Auburn. Alabama may need some help. Maybe they don't. We will see on Tuesday night. That's one thing I was going to talk about is, does Alabama need help? And therefore, again, it all depends on the perspective of what the rankings are in terms of the importance of the games. But if you're just simply asking me what games I like to watch because I love college football, I want to see Iowa and Nebraska play. Does that game mean anything? No. But am I going to watch Iowa and Nebraska play? Absolutely, I will.
Yeah. And Nebraska's bowl eligible now, right?
Yes.
All right. One thing I was trying to figure out and stuff, what happened with Miller Moss at USC this year?
He got benched.
Did he just – what happened? What made him go south?
I don't think much made him go south. A bad offensive line or a not great, mediocre offensive line. He got benched because his coach is somewhat on the hot seat or an uncomfortable position, and he needs to sell some hope and make some changes and make it look like he did something. Miller Moss is not the reason why USC is 6-5. He not that he played great, but he played pretty well. He played pretty well. A lot of teams could win a lot of games with Miller Moss at quarterback. Jade Mayava presents a higher ceiling. He apparently has a stronger arm. I've got to see that. That's what I've been told. Miller Moss, when he came out the first game of the season and lit up LSU, and then I've seen him. I've seen a lot of Miller Moss this year, and anybody can point out the mistakes that he made, but most of them came with somebody's face mask right in his grill.
Yeah. Now, do they have a puncher's change Saturday with Notre Dame?
Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely, they do.
Because the games is where, South Bend or is it in Los Angeles?
It's in Los Angeles.
Okay.
They absolutely have a puncher's. They've got a better than puncher's chance.
I'm not saying
Notre
they
Dame's
won't
not a
win.
great football team. Notre Dame's not a great football team, and USC is a very talented football team. Are they as good as Notre Dame? No, but they have more than a puncher's chance.
Okay. I'm just wondering. All right, sir. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday. Have a good one. See you Tuesday night. Take care and God bless, man.
Appreciate that, Michael.
Thanks.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
The top 25 that actually makes sense will be out later today. So that will be my rankings. And then I believe I'm going to post a video where I'm going to make a projection on what the committee is going to select. I think that will be my next. I would love to get power rankings done for all the conferences, a situation scenario video for all the conferences regarding the conference championship games. Now, with some of them, it's not worth producing a video. It's clear cut. That's what it is. Boom, boom, boom. But others, it's quite complicated. The Big 12. And then also college football playoff scenarios and paths to the college football playoff. But again, my opening statement last night is my favorite statement of this entire weekend. And that's that all of us, including myself to a certain extent, were fixated on the outcome of the Ohio State-Indiana game as it pertained to Indiana, and whether they would, of course, win the game, then they would be fine. But a loss, and rating that loss, evaluating the loss, close loss, blowout loss, et cetera, et cetera. And the one thing that I said prior to the game, because I did pick it 38-17 and it was 38-15, it pretty much went exactly the way I thought. Ohio State's going to get off to a slow start because they always do. And then they're going to dominate Indiana, and it's not going to be close, but it's not going to be some complete laugher. It'll be Ohio State will just prove to be a far superior team. Okay, so it basically turned out exactly the way I thought. But that to me is not like I don't consider that's like a borderline blowout to me. 14-7 at half, then a slow grind to 21-7, 28-7. I don't really consider that like a classic blowout. It's not competitive. It's not close. And so what do we do with Indiana? And we were fixated the entire week on what is going to happen to Indiana if they get blown out, or if they're within 2 scores and they're not real competitive, but they're not a laughing stock. What is going to happen to Indiana? What none of us talked about, including myself, and maybe this is me being stupid and not putting 2 and 2 together, is that at the same time that I was saying that, we were all contemplating that, I was saying I expect Auburn to beat Texas A&M. I expect Florida to have a great shot. I did not pick the upset, but I did pick the points and take the points. So obviously I predicted that to be a close game. So I was giving Florida like a 40-some% chance of winning that game against Ole Miss. So that was a huge possibility. Obviously it happened. So what I was not throwing into the mix, why I don't know, was, okay, if Indiana loses, maybe I said this at some point, if Indiana loses, but these other teams lose, I guess the Alabama one is the one that threw me and just about everybody. Alabama lost. So all these teams lost behind Indiana. So where's Indiana supposed to fall? And I understand that Miami's got one loss, and there seems to be, in a lot of people's minds, a recency bias that just because Indiana was not competitive against Ohio State and they just lost this game, that they should fall behind Miami. Should they really? Should they really fall behind Miami? A team that was lucky to beat Virginia Tech, was lucky to beat Cal, lost to Georgia Tech. They didn't lose to Ohio State. They didn't lose to arguably the best team in the country. They lost to a 7-4 Georgia Tech team that was so good that it went out and beat NC State in the final 45 seconds on Thursday night, 31-30. NC State sucks. They're not a good football team. And Georgia Tech beat them by 1 point. And that's Miami's loss. Indiana's loss is to, again, one of the definite 3 or 4 best teams in the country. And I've got this feeling that Indiana's just because we got to punish them and show them that they're Indiana, that Miami's going to elevate above Indiana. I don't see it. How much game control has Miami had this season compared to Indiana? Very little. Very little. I guess it's supposed to be impressive that they beat Wake Forest by 4 touchdowns. They did what they're supposed to do on Saturday. Wake Forest, they're an atrocious team. They're terrible. All right, let's keep rolling here at the Voice of College Football. We got David on the line. David.
Hello, Mark. As a man that likes chaos, I think we had a little bit of chaos yesterday, my friend.
We got a little chaos.
We did.
Would have liked to have seen a little bit more, but that's fine.
Okay. Well, we kept the chaos light, but we still had some, so I think that was a plus. Want to get into it and talk about it. Well, there was a guy that came on here and was talking about the SEC a couple weeks ago, saying that this isn't your older brother's SEC. I don't remember that guy, but he was trying to tell Mark Rogers that. And did we find out that might be the case yesterday, my friend?
I'm not seeing anything that I didn't think was possible or probable. Like
Oh,
I'm not understanding where there's an issue with the SEC. It's the best conference in college football.
right. And it's a bunch of average teams beating average teams.
Well, define average. Like, is
Okay.
the 10th best team in the country average? That's an
Okay.
average team?
Mark, they're,
There's
they're, they're,
135
they're,
teams. An average team is the 10th best team in the country.
I'll rephrase slightly. There's somewhere between average to good. Okay, there's some maybe good teams I would label in there, but Texas A&M, that's one of the worst Auburn teams, and they go there and they lose. That's not a good Auburn football team.
No, it's not a good Auburn team, but I still don't agree with your like based on your definition of average. I guess we would cancel the playoff. I don't want any average teams in the playoffs, and if we've only
Well,
got like 4 good teams in the country,
well, I've speculated that this is not a overall great year of college football. In fact, I think you could take multiple teams from years past, and they would come into this field and win this field by 2 scores or more. Like, let me give you an example. If you took 4 teams from 2019 and you put them into this field, they'd lap this field by they beat every team in this field by 2 touchdowns.
I don't know. I have
Well,
no
I
idea.
mean, I'm saying if you took like 2019 Clemson,
Yeah, that's
2019 Ohio
that's
State, 2019 LSU, and
I,
2019 Alabama, and you put them in this field, they'd run this field.
I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm not saying you're right either because we have no idea.
Okay.
I
Well,
don't run on that kind of speculation just because we have no idea. These
okay.
athletes are getting better and better. I don't know. I don't know. I have no
Okay.
idea. I know that
Well, you covered that entire college football season, and you've covered this entire college football season. So we have, a little bit here to kind
well,
of
of course.
to go by. And, watching those football teams and looking at these football teams, I can see a difference with my own 2 eyes. And that's what I'm saying. I think the pack has come back down to just being, kind of slightly average this year, is what I'm saying.
Are those teams that much better, or was there more of a gap between those teams and everybody else versus there being more parity among 10 or 12 teams now?
Yeah, I do think there's more parity.
Yeah, I don't see Joe Burrow playing right now. I don't see Trevor Lawrence playing right now.
Right. Well, that's the other thing I was going to say. I totally agree with that. I was going to get into that in a minute. The quarterback play at that time compared to this time, because the top 6 teams in the country that year all had starting NFL quarterbacks.
That said, uh, the guys that are putting up numbers now, the efficiency and the completion percentages just continue to go up.
Yeah. What I would say too, Mark, is that I see a bunch of good college quarterbacks, but I don't see a whole lot of people like I can see that guy as a starting NFL quarterback.
But we know that some of them will be.
Okay. Well, yeah, I guess you're going to say by pure desperation that some teams will put their hand on that stove. It will be interesting to see how many first round guys there are out of this draft, though.
You don't think in 5 years that out of Drew Aller, Shadur Sanders, Carson Beck, Nico, who else do we have to? I think even guys like Connor Wiegman
Mm-hmm. Mm.
and some others,
Cam Ward.
Cam Ward,
Okay.
uh, will most likely. I'm not making a prediction. I'm not an NFL scout, but I think there are all sorts of quarterbacks. Did we ever imagine Bo Nix being a solid starting quarterback in the NFL?
Fair point. Fair point. I think he was drafted on the right team where he's got a defense that's kind of doing some of the heavy lifting for him. But yeah, he's played better than I thought he would. As you know, um, I would lean towards saying that. But you're right, he's played better than I thought. Okay, to that quarterback play yesterday, kind of watching some of the games. Is it fair to? And did you watch? I know you had Ohio State, Indiana on, but how much of the Florida Ole Miss game did you watch?
Basically, all of it.
Okay. How fair is it to say that Mr. Lagway, DJ Lagway, might be saving Billy Napier's job right now?
It is a fair statement.
Oh,
Yeah.
is that just a different football team now than maybe we were seeing earlier in the year as far as Florida goes?
In that situation, I don't know if that should save his job or that should be an indictment against him not starting him in game one.
Yeah, I mean that could be a fair point. I agree with you. I think that there was always a feeling though with this football team when you looked at that dawning schedule that there was still like a ceiling of wins that this team was going to get to in any case. But if they get to 7-5, and I think most people being realistic with where they were at and where their schedule was at would have to say that that's a solid season for Billy Napier to maybe build on going forward and still be able to obviously keep his job because there were a lot of
Absolutely.
doubts about his security at the beginning of
Sure.
the year.
Yeah. Well, they got run out of the building against Miami and Texas A&M, and and this also brings into question how difficult this process is of ranking these teams. Like, would Florida win the Big 12?
They could, yeah. I was
They
going to speak.
could.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they could. I mean, right, and that speaks to where the Big 12 was at. I'm going to get to them in a minute. I have some comments on Colorado, Kansas. No, but go ahead.
So
I'm
you're
sorry.
telling me how bad the SEC is, but we're taking about the 10th best team and we're thinking they could win a major conference.
Well, the point that I was making was twofold. Number one, I'm making an SEC comparison to previous SEC years. Number one, and that's what I've said all along to you is the SEC by comparison to years past just doesn't compare, in my view. And
Well,
then
I
on
never
top,
disagreed with that.
okay. And I was also making, just as I said a second ago, the overarching statement about parity in general throughout college football, and that maybe college football overall is just kind of come down to the pack. Some of the more bottom teams have come up, which has allowed, the high end teams to maybe come back down. And this in the gap that we used to see years ago that you always talked about that we would see through recruiting and things like that is not that same gap. NIL is playing a part of that. The portal is playing part of that. Maybe coaching is leveling up in certain areas.
If we looked at the records of the top 10 to 15 teams in the country this year versus, and we would go through each and every year, I don't know that we would see much of a difference.
Okay. For me, it's eye test, Mark. I don't know. I mean, I see some teams where like
But we would see it reflected in the records. And I don't know that we do. I'm not saying that we don't. I have not done a test to look at it, but we're going to see a bunch of 10-2 teams
I
in the
don't know.
top 10.
I'm thinking also personnel, just personnel. This sport is largely about talent acquisition. You know that as well as I do, and I think the high end teams had far more talent acquisition 5 or 6 years ago than they do right now, and I think that the talent has been more spread out, i.e., with the help of NIL, with the help of the portal, and things of that nature.
Well, we had a dynasty at Alabama,
Yeah.
and
You had a Clemson run in there too that was all
sure.
time too. So you got to factor that in there for about 4 years.
Let's speak after the season.
Okay. Okay.
Let's watch the playoff games. We have
Oh,
very little cross-sectional elite teams playing. What elite teams have played non-conference?
yeah. No, it's a fair point.
This is what's wrong
It's a
with this
fair point.
sport, among a list of 37 other things. No elite teams have played. I can't think of any. None.
No, I get your
Zero.
right. Right.
Georgia Clemson. That would be the closest matchup of elite teams that have played in this sport.
Well,
That's a pathetic statement to
you
make.
you thought that there was some appeal to Texas and maybe the team up north coming into the season that like looked on paper to be a big time
Sure.
matchup. That
Yep.
didn't play out that way, but you know what I mean? It looked, in August like it could be something.
Everybody let that sink in. This happens in no other sport. We are sitting here the second to last weekend of the season. We have 4 major conferences, technically 5, but we've got 4 major conferences, and none of these teams have played an elite team in another conference.
Right.
None of them.
No, that's a fair point. That's a fair point. No, I just want to get into the rest of the docket yesterday if we can, Mark, because there's a few other games I wanted to talk to you about, if I may. Um, I did think that. By the way, Penn State, Minnesota. Did you watch most of that? I watched most of
Yes.
that game. Um, you mentioned something, and back to quarterback play. I just continue to be impressed with the way Drew Aller throws the football.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I just think he's a really solid quarterback. I do keep thinking with this football team the same thing that I keep on thinking, and I want to get to Notre Dame here in a minute too, is that there's just a ceiling with this team offensively. They better catch that right matchup in the first round because I just don't know if this is an offense capable of producing 30 points. Like I said, I've been bemoaning this point for a while with Penn State. If you gave Aller anything at wide receiver, this could be an offense that would kick up at least a touchdown or more as far as point scoring output, and I could see them winning that game. Now, I don't know, it's pretty dicey.
And not that those guys come just dropping off trees, but in terms of like a Tez Johnson type of player,
Yeah.
like really elite top end guys, Cam Coleman, we saw. Hopefully, a lot of people saw him for maybe the first time last night against Texas A&M. He's out in the Jeremiah Smith, Ryan Williams, but he's at Auburn, so nobody really paid attention to him this year. But yeah, you would think Penn State could go out and get somebody like that.
Yeah, they had like a Hamler and a Dotson or somebody like on that level or
Yeah.
close to that. Because they had, we talked about before, kind of a run of that for about 5 or 6 years. They never, again, it recruited as a group like an Ohio State does, but they usually had one guy that was like a difference maker guy like that. I just think that that's the thing. I would be real interested to see their matchup in the playoff because if they have to score some points, that's my, and is it also, we're just leery about James Franklin in the playoff, Mark?
Yes, we are. Yes, we are. I will say that I was playing mind games with myself as they were lining up for that punt with about 3 minutes left or whatever it was, because I thought they're a half a yard away, whatever it was, a yard away. As soon as Aller ran and he just got further and further and they hit him but he pushed him and then he rolled over the guy and got really close to the marker, I thought, they should go for a fake punt. If they're not going to go for it, they should go.
Yep.
And I thought, if I'm thinking they're going to go for a fake punt, then maybe they shouldn't go for a fake punt because PJ Fleck's got to be thinking that they're going to go for a fake punt.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It was a gutty call by Franklin. Give him credit. Give him credit. He knew he had to put the game away right there with his offense. His defense had already gotten him the stop that they needed maybe on the previous drive. He had to put that away.
See, it's funny because I believed it was the right call at the time. Even if it didn't work, I would have defended James Franklin's call. But he is the type team that, in terms of facing a Minnesota offense that isn't anything special and having the defense that he has, makes it less of a good call in my mind.
Right. I mean, Minnesota was getting a little confidence offensively there in that second half, I thought, and only needed a field goal. So, yeah, it was gutty by him and obviously turned out to be the right decision.
They kicked 2 field goals in the second half.
Yeah, I mean, they moved the ball well on the previous drive. I think they had some questionable play calling inside the 10-yard line there when they had the chance to get the lead.
Yep.
And, they got the stop. So, all right, let's take a look at the rest of it. I want to get to Notre Dame, Mark. I asked you a week ago whether you could conceivably see Notre Dame winning a national championship. I take it that even though they embarrassed Army yesterday and did what they did, you're still not willing to go there.
Well, I think that they did what good teams do, really good teams, and that they put away a team that's better than the Navy team that they put away 6 weeks ago. But that's not any kind of a litmus test. But There are really good teams that are going to be in this playoff or just outside the playoff that would not have done to Army what Notre Dame did. So I don't want to disparage them. That was a great victory. It was a great victory in that they played dominant football,
Yeah.
and they should have played dominant football. But what should be doesn't often happen, i.e., Alabama last night. So it's a strong win from the standpoint of taking care of business in a decisive, emphatic way.
Yeah, before I get to Alabama, just a couple things on Notre Dame, though, Mark. This football team's gotten a lot better, in my view. I know that they're beating bad football teams. Well, Army wasn't that bad of a football team, and to dominate them the way they did, I think, is a good statement. It also continues, doesn't it just continue to make the Northern Illinois loss that much more puzzling? Looking
Oh,
back,
absolutely, it's puzzling because football is a long game. It's not a basketball game like we see in the NCAA tournament where there's you can have a really talented, more athletic team that's cold in the first half and they're hot, and
mm,
suddenly the first half's over in 35 minutes, and you're down 29-19 and you're in trouble, and you start to white knuckle it. These football games last forever. You got all sorts of time to come back in these football games, and for them not to at some point right themselves and take charge of a game against Northern Illinois, who continues to drop games against mediocre MAC teams, it is baffling.
is still your hesitancy about picking Notre Dame to maybe contend for, win a national championship, play for a national championship, go far in the playoff, is still Riley Leonard and the offense putting points on the board in a against a decent team in the playoff?
Yeah, Riley Leonard has never impressed me for as much as he does as a runner, gamer, baller, tough guy, leader, as a passer.
Yeah. Yeah, I wonder. I kind of compare him of Notre Dame quarterbacks past. Is he better than Ian Book? Maybe Ian Book made 2 playoffs, by the way.
Uh, I think Riley Leonard's a little bit better of a runner, a little bit more elusive, a little faster. Ian
Mm,
Book was like a willing runner. In terms of their passing skills, yeah, I think they're 6-1, half dozen the other.
mhm. Yeah, but it's going to just be interesting to see what matchup. I think they win next week. A lot of people are going to, a lot of USC in an upset next week. By the way, you'll see some folks be throwing that out there next week, and it's plausible. I could see it happen. USC's played a lot of close football games this year, rivalry game. Lincoln Riley, hot seat like you've been talking about, could use a win like this big time, momentum into next year, all that.
Penn State went out there and were taken to overtime. So absolutely.
Yeah, how many early close games to USC lose? Like more than a few. So,
Yeah.
uh, on to Oklahoma, Alabama. Mark, are the Alabama issues offensively more offensive line related, more quarterback related, or that they just don't have maybe some of the skill at key positions that they've had in the past?
I would have told you before last night, I would have taken some heat off of Jalen Milroe and looked elsewhere, because when I watch Jalen Milroe play, by and large, he plays extremely well, but he was horrific last night. He was
Yeah.
horrific. Now, he didn't get much help. Like, he threw that
Mm,
screen pass for a pick right at the beginning of the second half. Well, if you're going to take Kirk Herbstreit's analysis of that play, that was not Jalen Milroe's fault. That was the Kobe Prentice didn't block his man. They had a 3-on-2 set up, so 3 guys should be able to handle 2, and you should be able to get a screen
right.
pass out to the wide receiver. But the second pick that he threw for the pick 6, like, if that linebacker Kip Lewis did not slide over, he obviously fooled him. He was baiting him, and he slid over right in time, and he picked it off. Even if he's not there, Jalen Milroe's throwing the ball to a tight end. I had to look this guy up because I'm like, look at this guy. He looks like an offensive lineman standing
Right.
on. He's just standing on the sideline, like hoping that I guess he was just an. I don't know. I would have had to watch his route. That if he was some kind of check down, but he had a defender standing right next to him. He would have picked the pass off.
Yeah.
It was a terrible decision.
A couple things, Mark. Number one, back to the quarterback thing. I always had my reservations about Jaden Milroe being seen as an NFL quarterback or projecting to that type of level. But I get your point that you were making earlier. Maybe the desperation of NFL franchises needing quarterbacks will, prop up some guys that I don't see as NFL quarterbacks to go higher in the draft than, they probably should in years past if it was a better quarterback class, in my view. Um, I will say the other thing too with Alabama is did they just not look good up front, by the way? I mean, that's the other thing I've been saying about Alabama. I haven't seen that running game dominant that we've seen in so many years past during the Saban era, where up front they can just push you around and they can just run the football down your throat. I don't think they look very good up front, Mark, and I particularly didn't think they looked very good up front last night.
They look pretty average everywhere. Not average.
Mm,
Average in your context. Average
right.
meaning not one of the best units in the country, meaning like the 15th best unit in the country. Like their defense didn't give up many points last night, but they got dragged up and down the field. They didn't make plays. They didn't
Well,
make game-changing plays. They didn't make havoc plays. They had Jackson Arnold run for 130 yards in the back. Xavier Robinson throw for or run for 110. They only had to have 11 passes thrown against them. They got controlled.
yeah, that was well, I didn't expect. I mean, that Oklahoma offense is atrocious. I mean, they've had quarterback issues and all kinds of offensive line issues, receiver issues, all kinds of things the entire year, Mark. I didn't expect them to put up much offense, and they certainly put up more than I thought they would. Um, I was just so perplexed by Alabama's offense and putting 3 points on the board in Norman. Although I think Oklahoma plays pretty decent defense. I mean, that's just wow.
Oh, they played excellent defense, and they do play excellent defense. And I
Yeah,
argued with a number of people over the last month who said, "Oh, so and so's got to play Oklahoma," and they said it in such a way that they were trashing the entire team. This is really good uh, defense. However, yeah, you should score 20. You should be able to score 20 points against anybody. Nobody's got the 85 Bears out there, and it's just an offensive game now. If you can't
right.
score 20 points, if you can't score 3 touchdowns in a football game, unless you're playing a certain style of game that's a little bit more of a rock fight, but still scoring 17 to 20, even in a rock fight, then there's something seriously wrong with your offense. That said, I got to bring this up
Yeah,
that Alabama did legitimately score 1 touchdown, and that might have been the worst call
yeah.
I've ever seen in my life.
It was bad. That was bad.
Like Herb Street was like, "What's going on? Can somebody explain this?" They brought in the official guy that usually sticks up for the officials to some extent or explains, "Oh, maybe they didn't see this or that." He was like, "I like it was a basic formation, illegal formation call, except it was not an illegal formation." So Bama scored the touchdown.
Is college refereeing overall just really bad this year, Mark?
Yes.
I mean, this is not a good like, I see them huddle up all the time, and I'm like, "This is obvious." It takes, like, a convention sometimes to make a decision, and, they just seem lost out there on some of these calls they're trying to make. It's horrible overall this year.
I think the review has made them worse.
Yeah, I
And
think
it's
there's
still a good thing to make sure that the calls are right, but I just think it has them second guessing and officiating a certain way, thinking that, well, if we blow it in one direction, we've got the replay to cover us. But if we blow it in the other direction, we don't. Like with the fumbles, if they don't let a fumble play out,
yeah.
then they get caught with, oh, we should have let them play through the play and the recovery and everything. So they sometimes make bad decisions because I think they're waiting for replay to step in and get it right.
Long term for Alabama, going to be interesting to see the rankings this week. Iron Bowl next week. I think there are going to be 3 loss teams in this thing. I mean, just because of the way the season's moving, I think some teams with 3 losses are going to get in by default.
If all the favorites win this weekend, we've got the 4 in the Big Ten. We'll have the ACC in the Big 12, Notre Dame group of 5. So there's 9. Then we got the SEC champion. Let's say Texas, Georgia go to the SEC championship game.
Yep.
Regardless of what happens, you either have two loss teams or you've got Georgia down to 3 losses. They still get in because they're going to be given a lot of leeway having been forced to play a conference championship game. So that's 11. So that leaves one other team. There is a slim, very slight possibility, if I did that correctly, that Georgia gets, if Georgia beats Texas, then they both have 2 losses. Tennessee's the other 2-loss team.
Right.
And you miss a 3-loss, but that's threading a needle.
Well, yeah. I mean, if Tennessee beats Vandy and goes 10-2 next week, and then Georgia takes care of business against Georgia Tech and their 10-2 finish, obviously they'll own the tiebreaker over Tennessee because of head-to-head. And then Texas really needs this next week. Texas needs to step up to the plate, and Sark needs to be the halfway decent team, I believe, for me to kind of be a believer in Texas. Are you still there with them, Mark?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm right there with you.
Yeah, I mean, because they've done nothing with this schedule so far this year as far as quality goes. By the way, quick comment on the A&M game. I just saw the end of it. Crazy game. Elko had a bad decision in that overtime, by the way. They were down 3. Auburn had kicked a field goal, and A&M had a chance to win with a touchdown. They had a 3rd and 6 and ran like a draw play on 3rd and 6 that I had no clue why they did.
Well, because they have a great running quarterback.
Yeah, but I mean, 3rd and 6, you still have to. I mean, it wasn't like he was an awful passer. You got to let him throw a pass.
Yeah, I'd have to go back and watch it. That didn't stand out to me.
I just remember watching the game at the sports bar thinking, I mean, it's 3rd and 6. You got to be able to let your quarterback throw and complete a pass. I mean, and they had a chance to win it right there because they'd held Auburn to the field goal. They score the touchdown on their possession. They win. You know,
Sure.
It was just, it stuck out. So
I'm not. I think you need to execute the play. I think I'm not a big detractor of play calling unless it's obvious. I just think the play didn't work.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, tough loss for them because they had a lot in front of them if they'd have won that game.
Yeah.
Did want to make one comment about the an SEC team before I get to Ohio State real quick. I will say and I said this last week, South Carolina, Mark. Where is South Carolina? Are they sneaking in there, Mark? I mean, they're playing some good offense. I've liked their D-line most of the year.
Into the playoff.
Yeah. They're a 3-loss team.
Sure.
In the SEC,
Clemson,
which I hear.
That's going to add to the resume.
Right.
So they beat Clemson. They add to the resume. They're 9-3. I don't know what they were this week, but that doesn't matter much. 15, 16, 17, 18. They'll jump up with the rest of these teams. So Alabama's going to win a tiebreaker with them just because they beat them on the field.
Sure.
The committee's going to honor the head-to-head if there's a tie with Bama. And they also, I guess that would be it in the SEC. They lost to Ole Miss. They lose that tiebreaker. Right. And they got dominated by Ole Miss.
Yeah. South Carolina, or their other loss was to LSU.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, but a quality win, and I tell you what, they're playing really well. There's a team that's playing really good football right now.
Absolutely, they are. I'm not saying that they don't. I'm not saying that those teams are better than them, but I'm saying that they don't have an argument.
Yeah, the tiebreakers. You're right.
Yeah, they're going to get. They really have a narrow path. I don't even know that they have a. Well, obviously, if Alabama loses and Ole Miss lose, then they've got a path.
I could see them beating the Fighting Davos next week.
I do. I think they will.
Oh, really? You're already calling it, Mark, huh?
I'm pretty close to calling it. Yeah. Wow. I think they're just a better team.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, that offense, the quarterback. The quarterback. What's that?
Me.
What's that?
I said Clemson's done nothing this year that's impressed me.
Oh, I totally agree with that. Yeah. On to the Buckeyes, Mark. I did want to talk about them. Just so impressed with the defense yesterday. I actually thought that game was going to be slightly more competitive. I think I called 31-20. is what I called before it started. I thought Rourke and those receivers would give Ohio State's pass defense some issues. The pass rush a lot better than I thought, Mark. A lot better than I thought. The Jim Knowles blitzes finally started to work. Most sacks we've had in a game the entire year. After that first drive, I was just so impressed. And I will say this. I think the linebackers are really starting to play well. Cody Simon looking really good, by the way, on bringing on the blitz and getting to the quarterback. And still a little questionable about the secondary. A team that might be able to hold up in pass pro can still maybe go after those corners a little bit, as I've talked about in the past. But the fact that they're getting a pass rush is just huge. And I think this defense is really turning it up right now, particularly that front seven. The D line finally looked good and got home. Offensively, I just think Will Howard is just solid. He had this few game stretch early in the year where he would occasionally make that "why did you do that" throw. He has gotten away from that the last few weeks for the most part. Okay. And his accuracy, particularly on the intermediate throws, I don't see very many passes outside the strike zone. They're usually right in between the numbers. So I know people were concerned about the offensive line play. I commented on the Buckeye show. I think it's pretty nice to have a center that a guard that was your starting center a year ago that you can just move over. So I think it was a little bit exaggerated, even though I think Seth was having a great year. But yeah, I think Ohio State did what they had to do. And I think I still come back to it. I don't think there are many holes on this team. I think it's the most complete team in the country.
Even though he did it last year for Alabama, I don't know that many people factored in Caleb Downs as a weapon, as a punt returner. That's a nice addition.
Yeah.
But along the offensive line, and Will Howard, when they signed Will Howard, I was excited. I liked Will Howard from all the time that I saw him at Kansas State. Then the more he got picked apart, the more I started to waver on him. And I stated that umpteen times here, that I still thought he was a solid guy, but can this guy win a national championship? Then his ugly performances got picked apart. Of course, he didn't have the weapons, probably didn't have the coaching. Not that they can't coach at Kansas State, but to this degree. On the other hand, he was playing worse defenses, so I countered with that. And now that I've watched him over and over and over, everybody misses throws, doesn't see throws. He missed the throw in the first drive of the game. He should have thrown the ball to Travion Henderson.
Yeah,
in right flat, gotten a first down, but he didn't see him. But that happens all the time. He's exceeded expectations.
I had said that only he needed to be a slight upgrade from Kyle McCord and where Kyle McCord was at. I think he's a major upgrade, especially from where McCord was at a year ago in this offense. No doubt about it.
If he was Kyle McCord and could just run the way he can, not that he's some sprinter, but he's a willing runner, and that's another facet of his game, then I made the basic statement that they're better at quarterback this year because of two things. Number one, you're comparing a 2.5-year starter to a guy that got his basically first start of the season last year. So he should be better. And number two, the running component.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I agree. I thought they'd do a little bit more design quarterback run this year, especially a little bit in goal line and short yardage, but we'll have to see if Chip Kelly does a little bit more of that moving forward. Again, I love the way the defense is playing. By the way, is there a game next week, Mark? So Ohio State are they playing a team that's?
Well, they played their big game this past weekend.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, they don't play anybody good next week, do they, Mark?
Yeah, you're not going to take me down that road.
Well, I don't want. Hey, I know. I don't want to upset your largest. Is it still your largest fan base, by the way, Mark?
I don't know. I think they're all watching the Michigan channel. They just watch the Michigan channel, which is fine.
Hey, I got to give them credit. They're doing like 85 hours worth of coverage post game to talk about what's going to be a 6-6 football team. They're all geeked up over there.
I jump in there for about 10 or 15 minutes, and that's about all I can stand. And then I dropped a comment on them yesterday to say, once the clock hit double zeros, triple zeros for everyone, we're talking about the game. It should be
Yeah.
about the game. I don't want to hear about Bryce Underwood. And, I didn't say it that way. They can talk about whatever they want. They don't have to accommodate me. But basically, why are these people talking about Bryce Underwood all the time? Whatever. It's fine.
When you're having a lousy season, you grab onto crumbs, Mark. That's what you do when you're lousy. You grab onto crumbs because that's all you've got. In a lousy 6-6 football season, when you're going to go to some bowl game that nobody cares about, you're not going to make the playoff, you've got really nothing to play for. Mark, this is what they have. This is all they have. It's kind of sad. I'm going to shed a tear, Mark. No, I'm not.
I hate to break your run here.
Yes.
That game's going to be competitive on Saturday.
Really?
Yes.
Well, I want the bloodletting to begin. I want Woody go for 3. I want, believe you me, 3 years worth of frustration has to be dumped out on that football field on that team, and reverses, wide receivers throwing touchdown passes. I tend to agree. I think their defense could keep that game somewhat competitive, but I think Ohio State's going to pull away by the third quarter. That offense is just horrible, Mark. Let's be real.
Yeah. It is. All right, David.
All right, my friend. Have a good week. Enjoy the NFL.
I appreciate it, David. All right, let's keep it rolling here at the Voice of College Football. Let's get through this. Adam, thank you so much for the contribution. Mark, the sole objective should be to pick the 12 best teams. If South Carolina and Florida win out, they should be in. Penn State is not among the best 12. I don't agree with that. I think Penn State's a better football team than both South Carolina and Florida. So they have a better record. They play in a comparable conference. They played a team in Ohio State that's better than anybody that South Carolina and Florida played. And they played them well. They had the ball at the 1 yard line to tie the game with 4 minutes left in the game. All right. We got the real MVP on the line. Hello.
No, this is Dr. C.
Oh, I'm
Mark.
sorry. Dr. C, I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. How's it going, Mark?
Good.
I just bought your book.
Oh, well, thank you. That's very nice of you. I appreciate it. I hope you like it.
Yeah, I can't wait. I can't wait to read it. Hey, hopefully I don't repeat any of the questions. I've been running errands, but so yesterday, did Napier save his? Because I thought there was a Billy Napier watch just 2-3 weeks ago. Did he save his job?
So it's my understanding, and correct me if, you're not going to be able to correct me. Somebody may be able to correct me in the chat because I didn't really look into it, but he was given more than a vote of confidence. It was basically stated that he was going to be back for 2025. That was before he beat LSU or Ole Miss, that he was going to be back for 2025 regardless.
Yeah, but those vote of confidence, don't they sometimes don't end up,
no, he wasn't given like a vote of confidence. They actually said he will be the coach in 2025. So that if they were going to go out and make that statement and not fulfill it, then that would be utter idiocy. So
got it.
I take it that they meant it. But the guy, I got to tell you, everybody that made fun of Florida football this year, it's back on them because, again, if we threw this team in the Big 12, maybe they win the conference.
Yeah. So, that kind of going back to what the last caller was saying, he said the SEC was a bunch of bad teams kind of beating each other up, right? Which I don't agree. Are we seeing teams kind of like these Florida and these teams that are coming out at the end, starting off really poorly and starting to beat, some of these teams that weren't expected, like Oklahoma last night beating Alabama? Are we starting to see teams gel? Are we starting to see the other teams beat up? It's probably a bit of both, right?
So Oklahoma, Alabama, I think we have all sorts of things going on there. We got Brent Venables, who has been pushed to the limit here. He is in that broad category of Billy Napier. Not that people were speculating his demise, but he is placing himself on a hot seat for next season. And he has always schemed well against Alabama. He's one of the few people to take down Nick Saban a few times in championship games. So he knows how to scheme up a defense. And so I also think that we see this every year. So I understand the narrative that this is a crazy season.
Mm-hmm.
We see these kind of upsets every year, the last few weekends of the season. All you'd have to do is go through every season, and you're going to see top 5 to 10 teams in the country that lose to 6-4, 5-5 teams. So, yeah, was I surprised that Oklahoma won? Absolutely. Should I be surprised? I guess not, because it happens every year. So, Alabama's not. They're not a great team. They're not an explosive team. They have a quarterback who does everything for them, and he's not a great passer of the football. He's a great deep thrower. He's probably the best in college football, but other than that, he's a bit clueless. And he had a horrible game last night, and he got little help. And they don't have the Henry Ruggs, Jerry Jeudy's, Jameson Williams, Jalen Waddle type receivers out there.
Yeah, Oklahoma has a new OC, and they were plagued with injury. I think they have 5 wide receivers down this season.
Yes. Yeah, the guy that gained 100-plus yards on offense for them rushing was not one of their top 3 backs to start the season, Xavier Robinson. And they had offensive line issues from day one. They had 2 starters out, and then their receivers started to get hurt. And by game, I don't know, it was only like game 4, they were down 5 wide receivers. I've never seen anything like that.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, they obviously, I'm sorry to cut you off. They obviously taught some people how to play the receiver position, but it's taken some time. And they only had to throw 11 passes anyway.
Yeah, definitely. And the same thing, well, the other game in the SEC, Hugh Freeze. I mean, obviously fans are irrational, are calling for his job, right? And they've looked terrible at the beginning, just awful. But they beat a pretty good team yesterday.
Yeah, I did expect that one. I did see that one coming. I picked Auburn to win. Yeah, they have been terrible this year. I continue to expect them to play better because their personnel says that they shouldn't be this bad. And that's one of the reasons why I thought, okay, this is an obvious upset here. Auburn athletically, in terms of talent, is just as good as Texas A&M. There's really little separation between these teams, if any. They're just being coached better, and Auburn cannot keep up this turnover fest. They are one of the most turnover-ridden teams in the country, and that generally starts to even out a little bit. And there you go.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, and last question. So I do hear a lot like the SEC is kind of starting to get a little disgruntled with how many teams are going to go into the playoff. And there's starting to be that discussion of, well, who really deserves it? In your opinion, do you think they're either going to change the rules for the 12, how they, rate each team, or do you see it getting expanded to 16 to try to solve that solution and make the SEC happy or some of the other conferences?
Well, the way the SEC and the Big Ten are pushing to be happy, satisfied by all this, is to push for a minimum number of entries into the playoff. That was the discussion during the offseason, that they wanted guaranteed spots in the playoffs.
Yeah, well, Lane Kiffin brought up an issue that he said that he talked to various coaches, and they were hoping, and maybe he he did it yesterday. They did not want to go to the SEC championship because he said if you go to the SEC championship and lose, you're pretty much out of the playoff.
It's a fair point. It's a fair point, depending on how the playoff committee evaluates those games. I said from the time that this playoff format was introduced, I went through all the playoff situations, all the rankings for the last 10 years, because that's certainly the valid 10 years to go through because there was a playoff committee, but even before that, using the AP rankings. And by and large, most of the teams that lost conference championship games were ranked safely inside the playoff, 12, entering the game. They were 9th, 10th in the country, and then they lost the championship game and they dropped to 14 or 15 and would have missed the playoffs. Now, what we don't know is if the committee is going to treat those teams the same. They should. If they are doing their jobs correctly, then they are rankings. They're always ranking. Even number 25 is ranked appropriately based on their system. They're not trying to fix things or set things up, but I don't trust them. So if you take past experience, then Lane Kiffin's exactly right. Now, we don't know if the committee would have said, okay, well, they were number 10 and they lost to the number 4 team in the country. We're not going to penalize them. We're going to keep them in the playoffs, because now they have to determine a playoff up to 12 teams. Before, it was just a ranking.
Got it. So right now, as it stands, it's going to be, if they both win out, which I think they will, Texas, Georgia for the SEC title, correct?
Yes.
And then for the Big Ten, is it Oregon, Ohio State, or Oregon, Indiana?
Ohio State.
Ohio State. Okay. So then,
if they beat Michigan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then the team that loses, for example, like you were saying, the SEC champion, or let's say Oregon beats Ohio State again, where does Ohio State go? Where they?
I would think that they're still going to be in.
Who's the one team right now that you fear is going to be left out that probably should? Is it Indiana or like Ole Miss?
I hate to give very compromised answers, but without knowing everything, you can't. Of course, the question can't be, what happens to them if they lose this game? Well, what else is happening? Like Indiana lost yesterday, and like I said at the top of the show, we were all fixated on what's going to happen to Indiana if they either lose a close game or lose a blowout. Well, what happened is they lost something between a close game and a blowout, depending on your perspective. But all these teams lost behind them. We didn't factor in Ole Miss is going to lose, Texas A&M is going to lose, Alabama is going to lose, BYU is going to lose. So Indiana shouldn't really fall much. They shouldn't. So Ohio State should be fine if they lose the Big Ten championship game to the number 1 team in the country. I don't know why they would, if they, especially if they, the reasoning shouldn't just be, okay, your record's this, therefore you get placed here. If you're the number 2 team in the country and they lose again to Oregon on a last-second field goal, they should probably still be the number 2 team in the country. Isn't that what the number 1 and number 2 teams in the country should play down to the last play of the game? So, I don't know. A lot of people have it in their minds, and I get it that you need to punish and penalize for losses, but that for some reason, if the number 3 team in the country beats a 5-5 team, but the number 2 team loses to the number 1 team, and it's this classic epic game, well, then number 3 should pass number 2? Really?
Yeah, that's a great point, Mark. What about, so next week? I mean, it could happen, right? I mean, I'm guessing Indiana's beating Purdue. That would be, I think we can all bet the house on that. But what happens if Michigan pulls it off again, right?
Yeah. Again, it all depends on what else is happening across the country.
Right.
Ohio State right now is number 2. If they lose to a 6-5 Michigan team, do they fall all the way to 12 or 13?
Yeah. And then, did Ole Miss pretty much end their season yesterday?
Probably.
Yeah.
But again, we don't know because you got to fill in all the other blanks.
Yeah. Yeah.
Ole Miss can still make the playoffs. Alabama can still make the playoffs with 3 losses. Is it likely? No, I think it's less than 50-50, but it's not unimaginable.
Would you be in favor of keeping the playoff like it is now or growing it to 16?
And one last thing is the best thing that happened for those SEC teams that lost is that BYU and Colorado lost too. So the teams behind them lost as well. So the Big 12 screwed themselves in the outcomes this weekend to get multiple teams into the playoffs. Oh, man, how would I change this? I should have a definitive answer because I've built all sorts of playoff models the way I would do things. I think we have plenty of teams in the playoffs, and I think that there needs to be some kind of reward system for winning a conference. Because if we go to 16, then what's the benefit to winning your conference? I guess it's that you are going to play at home. Fine. I'm okay with this system. I would like to take the committee out of it. I would banish the committee, and I would set up a completely objective playoff system.
Yeah, definitely. How would you achieve that, though?
Well, first you got to deal with scheduling. So if the scheduling becomes better, as I mentioned to a caller just a few minutes ago, this is a really pathetic accusation of this sport, indictment of this sport. Here we are, the second to last week of the season. We've got 4 major conferences. We used to have 5. We technically still have 5. And who are the 2 best teams that have played in non-conference play? I guess Georgia and Clemson, like the number 10 team and the number 17 team. Those are the 2 best teams that have been on a field together. That's terrible. We played an entire college football season and we couldn't have seen like the number 3 team play the number 6 team or the number 1 team play the number 8 team or something. That's the best game. That's the best matchup. Those are the 2 most closely ranked, highest ranked teams that have played this college football season against each other. And we're supposed to evaluate these teams and these conferences against each other. We're basically evaluating the conferences by extension when we evaluate these teams. And that's the best we can go with?
Yeah, no, that's a great point. Are we going more, do you think, are we going more off of just record or eye test?
Well, I think that we go by this. You're talking about the committee.
And yeah, I mean, well, I think
Or
as
us.
fans, I think we go by eye test. Well, that, kind of Indiana's kind of like that, who has Indiana played versus, who's better, Indiana or Ole Miss, for example, right?
Yeah.
And the records are vastly different.
In talking to you guys all the time, I think a lot of people go by rankings. They love the rankings.
Mm-hmm.
I hate the rankings. I just think that there's no reason that we should think that the number 25 team in the country, the supposed number 25 team in the country, is this good football team, and then suddenly everybody else disappears. They don't exist. Like the number 26 team in the country, like even if the committee had ultimate omnipotence, complete wisdom, the number 26 team in the country is like, I can't even put my fingers close enough to the number 25 team in the country. But that's not a ranked win. But number 25 is a ranked win. Like, all the teams should be ranked or none of them should be ranked. I never look at rankings when I'm comparing teams. I look at their records and what they've done. I don't say, okay, well, Illinois was not ranked 2 weeks ago, and then they won. I'm trying to think who they beat last week. It was somebody who was no good, but then they got ranked. Okay, now they're ranked. So everybody that beat Illinois beat a ranked team. But last week they didn't beat a ranked team. I remember one season where Michigan State was playing 4 consecutive ranked teams. And so they had this just difficult schedule. And they beat all 4 of them. And as soon as they beat them, they knocked every one of them out of the rankings. So by the time they got through that, then suddenly Michigan State hasn't beaten a ranked team. Well, does that make any sense? They knocked them all out of the rankings.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's a great point. Well, Mark, I'm going to let you go. But, this season, I started off thinking Georgia was going to be the national champion. And then I thought Ohio State. Then I thought Oregon. And, I've been going off of the eye test. And then then Alabama was who I thought was going to pull it off. Now I'm not sure who I'm picking this week.
None of us are sure. None of us know.
Without saying it, in your mind, out of 4 teams in your mind, you pretty much know who's going to win it all, don't you?
I do?
Yeah.
Oh, I'd run to Vegas. And, well, I don't have to run to Vegas these days. We can just go online.
Hypothetically, if you had to pick 4 teams,
country,
or I would narrow it down to 3 teams that really have the shot of winning it, right?
I think these 4 teams, if the national champion does not come from one of these 4 teams, I will be pretty surprised. Ohio State, Oregon, Georgia, Texas.
Who's that one team that could potentially be that number 5? It'd blow your mind, but you could say, you know what? I should have seen this.
So there are 1, 2, 3 teams that I'm thinking of for different reasons. One is we just saw them look pathetic last night, Alabama. And I don't like to give up on my preseason predictions, and I picked Ohio State and Alabama in the national championship game. So Alabama, for as bad as they looked, I still, if they were in the playoff and we started, if they were going to Bloomington, Indiana as a 11 seed against a 6 seed, I'm taking Alabama to go to Indiana and win. Like, I still think they'd be dangerous. Tennessee would be dangerous, and Notre Dame would be dangerous.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And Ole Miss would be dangerous.
This season especially, it seems like everyone's dangerous. Yeah. But I have to say, Oregon, Oregon, I'm going to go back to Oregon this week.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, Mark. Well, I won't take any more of your time. Thank you so much. Can't wait to read your book.
Appreciate you being here. Thank you so much for the purchase. I appreciate that.
Anytime, Mark. Take care. Bye.
Our buddy there, Dr. C, picked up the book. So that seems like a good segue. I'm not the brightest guy in the world, but that seemed to be a pretty layup of a segue there. Disputed National Champions. The link is in the description section of this video. All the videos. It's $9.99. That's it. It's a fun read. It's not War and Peace. It's not going to take you too long. It's about 100 pages. And we go through every season of the 1990s. And we basically set you up for every specific season. And we talk about what the season looked like going into the season. We run through all the storylines, all the main players, coaches, and then we set you through the season on all the results that impacted the championship. And then the postseason results, the matchups in the postseason, the results of the postseason. And then we get down to the analytical side of it. We say, who got screwed? Who got left out? Where were the injustices? Did the rankings get it right? Were they invalid? Were they credible? And then we talk about the impact of that particular season. Did that vault a particular team, coach, dynasty? Was that the end of an era for some particular reason? And then what is the real gem in this book is that it's not a history book. So that would be a history book. It's not a history book. So we take the results of each season in the 1990s, 1990, all the way through 1999, and we place it into the BCS era, the 4-team college football playoff era, the 12-team era, and of course, we've got a proposed 14-team era. And we let you know what that would look like in today's game. So the 1996 season, we had a 12-team playoff in 1996. Arizona State, number 1. Florida State, number 2. Florida, 3. Ohio State, 4. BYU, 5. Nebraska, 6. Virginia Tech, 7. Why those top 7? Why did I stop there? They were the conference champions, and those would all receive, of course, the first 7 slots, conference champions. Penn State, 8. Colorado, 9. Tennessee, 10. Northwestern, 11. North Carolina, 12. That would be the 12-team playoff in 1996. Northwestern made the playoff, 1996. Of course, they, in reality, lost to Peyton Manning in the Citrus Bowl. All right. Appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. Let's go to our next call. But first, I appreciate Erwin with the comment here. Really wanted to see Colorado get completely embarrassed in the playoffs. Oh, well. We'll have to break down the Big 12 this week. We will. We got a Big 12 show live Monday at 2 p.m. Eastern time. But before that, I would like to get through the Big 12 scenarios. But I believe that Iowa State and Arizona State control their own destinies. If they win, they're in the Big 12 championship game. Obviously, if one of them or both of them lose, then it becomes much more complicated. What we're going to have to figure out is we've got 4 teams in the Big 12 that are 6-2. Iowa State, Colorado, BYU, and Arizona State. Then we've got a bunch of teams that are 5-3. Those top 4 teams, none of them play each other. So what if they all lose, or 3 of them lose, and then these 5-3 teams win to go to 6-3 to tie those teams? Talk about a mess. Welcome in, Adam. How you doing today?
Hey, Mark, how are you?
Good. How's it going?
All right, thanks for taking my call. I'll be brief. The first point I have is I'm not sure why people seem to draw this like line of demarcation between 2 lost teams and 3 lost teams. Like, what is so substantial, given the difference in schedule strengths, that it seems like people are more comfortable with 2 versus 3 lost teams?
Well, I can't explain that either, because I think that there should only be one demarcation, and that would be between 0 lost teams and 1 lost teams. Every other one is just a made-up marker. When we were in the previous model, people made the line between 1 lost teams and 2 lost teams. Well, suddenly if you lost a second game, you can't go to the playoffs because you got 2 losses rather than 1 loss. And like you, I never understood that, except for, of course, we evaluate the wins and losses. So it's an additional loss, sure. But what's magical about 2 losses versus 1, or now what is magical about 3 losses versus 2? So that does not get in my way. I do think that there's something special about being undefeated, because regardless of how bad your schedule may be, nobody has proven to beat you. You have not shown that you can lose to anyone. That doesn't mean that you're unbeatable, but it means that nobody has defeated you.
No, that's a good point. And, people who are so hung up on records, I would refer them to the 6 lost Giants, who in 2007 beat the undefeated Patriots in the Super Bowl. But my second point is I think if Florida and South Carolina win out, they should both be in. And the reason I say that is because I think they're among the 12 best teams. If Florida had Ohio State's schedule, or if Florida had a Big 12 schedule, would they be 7-5? No. And the question is, if you think that Florida could defeat any of the current 12 teams that are ranked by the committee, If you believe that, then why would you not put them in?
Well, I believe that all sorts of teams can beat the 12 teams in the playoffs. We just saw Oklahoma beat Alabama last night. We just saw Auburn beat Texas A&M. We saw Florida beat Ole Miss. So all sorts of teams outside the 12 can beat the teams in the 12. It's more about honoring the teams that over the course of 12 games were the best teams.
Do you think that Florida, well, that assumes a consensus about how you define the best teams. Do you believe that South Carolina and Florida are better teams than anyone in the top 12? Or one of them?
I think that once you get past the elite 3 or 4 teams in the country, the best 3, 4, 5 teams in the country, that you can go from roughly 6 or 7 to 25 and not have much separation.
That's a legitimate answer. I guess my point is that it may seem controversial, but I am trying to find the 12 best teams. And sometimes the best team among those 12 best, there may be a team with 4 or 5 losses. We see this all the time with the wild cards in the NFL, and we act like it's so crazy to think that Florida or South Carolina cannot be among the 12 best. And I think that's a kind of a myopic view of who the 12 best teams are, as evidenced by the fact that Penn State's number 4, which I think is ridiculous. Now, I know everyone's going to disagree with me, but let's see how the playoffs pan out. But I think if we're really committed to a legitimate college football system with integrity, we have to make courageous decisions that recognize who those 12 best teams are. Thanks, Mark.
Why don't we look at Texas A&M and LSU?
I'm happy to look at Texas A&M and LSU. I would have to look at their record and their resume. I can't do that right now.
So Texas A&M's 8-3 and LSU 7-4, and they have wins against some of the teams we're talking about.
Yeah, well, then I'm happy to consider them. But my point is that I wouldn't automatically eliminate them. I'm not going to automatically eliminate A&M and LSU. I'm going to look at who the 12 best teams are, and after an analysis where we have legitimate criteria, I may include them. I'm not sure, but my point is we're placing too much emphasis on records given the disparity in schedules. If Florida played Ohio State's schedule or a Big 12 schedule, they would not be 7-5, and I think that that's evidence of the fact that you have to look beyond the numbers, beyond the record, in determining who those best 12 teams are. Thanks, Mark.
Thanks, Adam.
Always good talking to you. Yeah.
So Adam anchors our Rutgers channel. Rutgers had a disappointing last-second loss to Illinois on Saturday, 38-31. And again, Adam gets together on the Rutgers channel with all of you every Monday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. I hope I got that straight. Because when we look at our schedule here, let's see what we got here. Just to let you know, I used to be able to rattle off these shows. But now this is what I'm trying to remember, and this is why I had to build this document. Because here's the lineup here at the Voice of College Football, and shoot, this may not even be accurate at this point. On Sunday, we've got my show at 11 a.m. Eastern Time that we get together with all of you. We've got a Florida show coming up at 7 Eastern. We've got the College Football After Dark show at 10:30. Then on Monday, look at all this business. We do a big show with Big 12 Mafia at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. We've got Alabama, Texas, Missouri, Rutgers, Oklahoma, and a new Ohio State show at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. That's on Monday. On Tuesday, I Talk Iowa Football with Corey Brad at 5:30. We have the College Football Ranking Show, so the next time you will see me live, most likely, unless I've got a whim to go live, will be during the ranking show. So we'll do the watch party at 7 p.m. Eastern Time on Tuesday. Nebraska, SEC Live, Indiana Live, the biggest 12 with Clint Foster. We've got Michigan Live. We've got USC Live with myself and Matt Zemek on Tuesday night. Wednesday, we've got Ohio State that I host. The Ole Miss show that I've been hosting with Ruby and Leanne. We've got Florida State. We've got Miami. We've got Notre Dame. We've got the Mountaineer Locker Room with Frank Fear on the West Virginia channel. We've got the All In Clemson show, and we've got the USC Call-In show with Tim Prangley. And then it lightens up a bit near the end of the week. Thursday, we've got a Michigan show, Ohio State show, Alabama Call-In show. And then I usually join you that night. And then on Friday, we've got our show after all the ball games. So a lot going on here at the Voice of College Football. But most importantly right now is we've got this on Sunday and Monday. All right, folks, appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. Enjoy the action throughout the day in the NFL. If you love the NFL, Top 25 That Actually Makes Sense is coming your way soon, and all sorts of other videos with power rankings and scenarios in the conferences involving the championships and the CFP rankings. We will see you on Tuesday night.